Hello and welcome. I was actually looking to see what episode number this was because I had 46 in my head. Holy crap, we're at 49. 49 weeks of CIS Benchmarks, the most thrilling webinar series on LinkedIn. So, very awesome, guys. Thank you for joining us this week. We have an exciting episode with Andy Laren from All Care IT, Rich McGraw from CIS, and myself, Zach
Sure.
from Senteon, to talk about a good amount of settings today, Andy. I don't know if you realize, but I think you have like 15 settings today, which is a little bit more than the other guests have to tackle. So
There are quite a bit.
looking forward to seeing how you do it. As per usual, we are going to kick off with just some housekeeping, talking about Senteon, what we do, and how we do it. So really quick, let's go ahead and pull up my screen. Some things that have been going on our side. I did give a presentation at ChannelCon at CompTIA. It is on security configurations and hardening, as you can imagine. But I did do a live stream of this same presentation for InfoSec Live. I'll be dropping that link into the comments if you wanted to see what that was all about. We are also going to be joining ConnectWise on their Friday field report. I have my awesome AI captain photo generated by one of the booths out there. Thought that was too good and made it my profile picture.
Made me laugh. I love that one.
I did not realize they were going to use that as my professional headshot for their webinar, but that is perfectly fine.
That's
So-
this week.
And-
Zach. Nice.
And you put it on LinkedIn, so you know
That is this week. We're going to be talking. It is what it is. So we are going to be talking about a little bit on ChannelCon, the trends we're seeing in the market, and very exciting updates on all of that end. Senteon is part of Pitch It, which is one of the reasons we are going on to this episode. The next show we'll be heading to, as much as I've begged Andy, timing is not working out. So I will be representing Senteon without our friend Andy there. But hopefully we can get some all care representation. But Senteon will be heading to Can IT Con in September. And as a reminder, these episodes are all live streamed and saved to our YouTube channel. And you can find these on our website. I appreciate it, Tim. Hopefully I get to see Tim at a show one of these times. And you can watch the replays, read the blogs, whatever floats your boat. And if you did want to take advantage of our free offering, you can hit login right here. It'll take you to a sign up page. All you need to do is input settings webinar, and we'd be happy to give you some free reporting and the freemium option of Senteon. And as a reminder, Senteon here. What we do is harden workstations, servers, and browsers to the CIS standards. We always talk about CIS, and Rich is a big advocate of CIS, of course, Andy as well. But CIS does crosswalk to many other frameworks and regulatory compliances. So Senteon has broken this up into an easy-to-use database, so you can actually see which setting fits into what framework. And even better than that, you can click into the setting. Thanks to CIS, we have the description, rationale, and everything there. But we also have added all of the crosswalk details as to why it's a requirement for whichever flavor of framework you're looking for.
So nice.
Yeah, I mean, CIS provides it all. We just put it in a little bit digestible view. And the last thing here, if you do input that settings webinar, we're happy to provide some reporting so you can actually see all of the settings and where you're compliant and where you're not compliant. And you can do the same thing as before, adding in those crosswalks. So very awesome. But with that,
So
the plug
easy
for
to operationalize those great CIS benchmark settings. It's just so great. Thank you.
not a lot of, I mean, no end client. Andy, we can kick off with this one. End clients don't know what CIS is, I imagine. Maybe I'm wrong, but you are a massive advocate. I know you follow the framework yourself. How do you talk about CIS as part of your sales intro?
a little bit, but we don't go into the 18 different subsets of CIS. But we do talk about it as the Center for Internet Security. So just the name itself is fantastic. Generally, what we talk about is NIST with clients, just because it's the five basic components of NIST are easy for an end user or generally it's C-suite that we're dealing with to understand. You can't protect something that you can't identify. You have to identify it before you can protect it. Whereas the CIS end of it is more for us. It's prescriptive. It's how to do it, how to do the protections, and so the cross mapping between them is phenomenal.
Yeah, for sure.
I actually like that point of view because 18 controls very overwhelming. You only have so much time in that sales conversation with an end client as an MSP. So taking 5 categories, imagine, is a bit more digestible. So
Yeah,
sorry
I
to
mean,
kick off.
we do talk about it just from a little bit from a maturity standpoint, that a smaller organization
Yep.
has to do less versus a larger organization. So that's where CIS does come in. Like, why do a pen test before you even identify what things are? So
Yep.
I love that, the maturity model of CIS.
Yeah, if I can build upon that just a little bit, a lot of people that are trying to comply to NIST, is as you pointed out, Andy, maybe it's their framework of choice and they've been at it for a long time, and that's great. Or maybe it's a regulatory compliance thing for their particular organization. And it's the CIS controls are still very useful. And the reason why I say that is because they are broken up into implementation groups. So there are the 18 high level controls, and I think it's a total of 157 controls in total when you go down, into all of them. But if you concentrate on implementation group one, and depending on the level of security the client needs, move into implementation group two, and that gives you the right order and sequence and the biggest security benefits as you go down that path. And then use Senteon or and map that out to NIST, and then you can sort of fill the gaps from there. But it gives you that quick start to get the as much done as possible. And the other thing that, from an MSP perspective, is what's really useful is you can even use the assessments that you could do a self assessment for an organization versus the CIS benchmark. I'm sorry, the CIS controls implementation group one. Senteon can do that assessment very quickly and easily. And then, once you demonstrate that report to, a custodian of that infrastructure or that data or that organization in general, it's very clear that work needs to be done, and it can almost become a sales roadmap for organizations to use a sales tool to help plug those gaps, which is a combination of services and product and all kinds of things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I love the breakup of IG1 versus 2 and
Yep.
3. And that's what we talk to clients about, is that not specifically all of the parts of IG1, but that there is a subset for smaller organizations and medium-sized organizations,
Right
and
on.
then very large enterprise organizations, because they'll say we can't do what a bank is doing. No, of
Sure.
course
And
not.
they don't need to.
The attackers for a bank, they have to do a lot more.
Yep.
So and that's why we say this is broken up. So this is for small organizations. This is like the basics. This is what everybody needs to do.
Yep.
If you've got a medium-sized business and a medium-sized budget, then we can move you into IG2.
Yep.
Um, you know,
IG1
our
is basic cybersecurity hygiene for every organization.
you got it. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't do anything in the IG3 space,
Yeah.
but that will come with larger clients. But
Sure.
IG1 and IG2 is where we sit in.
That's
Excellent.
awesome. And we jumped right into the technical talk, which is perfectly fine. But Andy, you are obviously a very mature MSP. You follow a framework, you follow the right policies and procedures, and I'm sure you even have documentation, which is oh so rare nowadays. But
We
Andy,
try.
we jumped pretty far into it. Do you mind taking a step back and introducing yourself and All Care IT?
Absolutely, sure. So we're a smaller MSP in Kingston, Ontario, Canada. So we're between Toronto and Montreal. We take care of clients all over Canada and even a few in the U.S. Been in business for a long time. Started in '96, doing a lot of hardware back then, and then eventually moved into services, and then eventually into managed services about 11 years ago, 12 years ago, and
So you
then
made
into
that
a lot of security
transition
services.
from really break fix and traditional MSP to, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Andy, I didn't know you're from Kingston. I have spent my years growing up sailing on Lake Ontario, and we would go to
Oh,
Kingston
awesome.
every summer. Confederation Basin, beautiful
You
place.
You got it. Yeah. So that's Confederation Basin is 10 minutes away from our office. Beautiful area. A lot.
Wonderful.
If they know the Thousand Islands,
Yep. This is
pretty popular area.
kind of jumping off point to the Thousand Islands and so forth, and it's a wonderful place. It was always a highlight going to Kingston.
Yeah, beautiful spot. It's a nice sized city for us, about
Beautiful.
140,000. So it's just the right size. It's got all the amenities without being such a, multi-million person city.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place.
It'll only be my second time going to Canada once I get to that trade show. So I'm very excited to see the area. It looks beautiful from the photos. But
Cool.
per our new routine, we are going to jump right into the settings. That is obviously the highlight. And with the time remaining at the end, we'll definitely dive deeper into the learnings and the experiences of you working with CIS. So let's pull up some of these slide decks and get into these settings.
Perfect.
Assume. There we go. So CIS benchmarks, as we know. So just as a really quick, we talked a lot about IG, IG1, IG2, IG3. I want to emphasize here at the beginning of these slides, we can just show the first one even. In the bottom right corner, there is going to be a level. This is slightly different, not slightly, this is different from the implementation groups. This is actually referring to level 1, level 2, which is a CIS benchmark terminology. Level 1 is expected to have everyone. This is just basic cyber hygiene. There's very unlikely to experience disruption, and it's just something every business should have. While level 2, or if you, depending on your CIS benchmark document, may have next generation, BitLocker, XYZ categories, but level 2 and beyond is going to be very disruptive, or potential to be very disruptive. This is things like disabling RDP altogether. Andy, I can't imagine your business could run if RDP didn't exist. So
we use different things.
there are alternatives, and that is another really critical point to call out here. These CIS benchmarks are recommendations. There's no need to follow it 100%. You can go beyond the recommendation. You can go below the recommendation. It's all about those complementary controls and everything around that. So per the new schedule, Andy, we're going to hop right into the settings. So we have the first one here with ensure enable Google Cast is set to disabled. Do employees need to have cast available all the time? Like, what if they need to do this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice setting to have at times when you do need it or do want it. But to have it available all the time, lots of mistakes could definitely happen. So, I always talk to clients about security and convenience. You make something nice and convenient, it's not very secure. You make it uber secure, it's not very convenient. So it's trying to find that happy medium. And every business is a little bit different, but trying to find where that is. And I lean more toward more secure rather than more convenient.
Nice.
I actually have a question, because this is very hard. As an MSP, you work with, tens or even hundreds of clients, right? Depending on the scale.
Yeah.
Do you have like a general questionnaire when you pick up a new prospect or a new client? Like, or one of those questions, how do you cast your machine to other devices, or do you do this, right? Is there is there a best practice? How do you avoid disruption?
No, I wish that we had one that was that granular. That would be, I think, a little bit.
That'd be a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to have 500 questions. But with every new prospect, we actually do a security audit for them, and then we show them some of the gaps that they currently have. Usually, it's like really basic things like storing passwords in the browser, super insecure. And so when we show them all of their passwords and that they're stored in plain text and anything has access to it, well, first of all, we have to bring them back up off the floor because
seriously.
And the tool that we use actually compares what is there in their browser to what's available out already on the dark web.
Nice.
And it also looks at all of the different passwords that they have and how many times they're using that password on various different sites. So then we talk about how if one of those sites falls, then they'll use a password spray attack. So those are some of the things that we go through. And then because of that, then we can start talking about hardening the machine. So, number 2 in NIST is protect, and protect, a huge portion of protect is really hardening. There's obviously other parts to protect, but hardening something makes it so it's much easier to protect.
Yeah, I'd like to add also on this setting This, this setting is one that is hard to manage because, maybe you do want to enable it, but, people will forget to flip the switch. So that begins what we call configuration drift. And that's where,
Yeah.
a tool like Senteon can kind of do a scan in, if that's something important to the organization to turn that off. You can do that through Senteon and, just sort of manage that configuration drift over time. So there's that sort of balance between ease of use and security, and you can manage that pretty effectively at times.
Yeah.
What's up, John? Thanks for joining, brother. And I mean that's a good point, right? There's going to be exceptions that need to be made,
Yeah.
right? If that admin is testing a tool or something, they need to allow a setting to be available. They can do that, right? It's just remembering to change it back, because if you don't remember to change it back, that is actual drift, and that's an accepted risk you don't want to have, right?
Right.
So very, very good points. And you were diving in a little bit into that hardening is, second in NIST. Not only is it second in NIST with that protect layer, after the first three controls of CIS, it's really asset inventory, hardware, software, data protection. The fourth priority is security configuration management, right? This is 3 priorities higher than even vulnerability management. So it's very interesting how both respective frameworks prioritize this so high, but it's not always done across a lot of
Well,
MSPs.
I think one of the challenges with that, the way NIST describes protection is can be interpreted in different ways, and that's why we try to make the CIS controls very prescriptive, so you're not misinterpreting what does protection mean. It means hardening. It means a lot of things and it can mean different things to different people. That's why we try to be as prescriptive as possible in the CIS controls implementation group 1 as well as 2 and 3.
Absolutely.
And even as prescriptive as it is, we've got the CIS work group with Matt Lee. Some of the things are still difficult, even for a group of very technical people to
100%.
actually understand and to implement per tool or per environment or
Yep.
per operating system. So
Understood.
these things are not easy.
No.
But something like this with the Google Cast, it's something that could easily accidentally happen where somebody is sharing graphics or sharing sound out to some other device on the network somewhere else, and privacy really comes into play here.
Yep.
So it for something like a laptop in a boardroom where you want to be able to cast it, sure, leave it on. But for the most part, I mean, really what should happen inside of Google, again, they don't do it because it's not convenient, but there should be like a big button to say, turn this on, and it only stays on for an hour, and then they can cast it. But they don't do that. For convenience
That
sake,
would be
it's
really
just
nice.
a little button that they say cast, and people will accidentally click it.
Sure. Because they don't even know what it is.
Exactly.
No? All right. I am going to have a follow-up question to that, but let's keep the settings moving to make sure we keep our time. So this next setting here is going to be allow websites to query for available payment methods. You already talked about passwords at the start of this.
It's
Are we
crazy.
telling me the browser might actually expose some of those saved payment methods?
I mean, this one is like a no-brainer. Like I can't believe that they're, when it comes to convenience, this is like the ultimate inconvenience, right?
For the
Just
hacker.
allow the site to query, do I have payment available? Yes, you already have it available. Great, I can use that. I mean, that is insane that is on by default. Again, that should be something that if the site wants it, it pops up and says, hey, the site is querying this. Do you want to allow it? But for this to be allowed just by default, always on, it's crazy.
No.
So of course,
And,
disable it.
yes, definitely disable. And what's crazy again is a lot of these presentations I do working with MSPs, they always like, I don't want my password saved to the browser, right? No one ever goes to Senteon and says, I don't want payment methods saved to the browser, because it's all about passwords. But I have to remind everyone I work with, hey, passwords is one configuration out of about 100 on a Chrome. And this is one of those other 100 that should probably be talked about a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong here, but this does not disable the ability to use the payment. All it does is stops the API from the website querying if something is available, correct?
This
I think that's
I
the
believe
probe.
this.
So the user, as far as I know, can still say, yes, I want to use this available payment, but it stops the website from checking, do they already have one available?
Yes,
I think it
yes.
makes it so
This
that
is the
if it,
general. This is the general
yeah,
browser saving it, and the website checking with the browser. This isn't like saving to. Yes.
yeah. So basically, they can still have a payment method in there, although I still disagree with that being in the browser, but it
Yes,
just tells the API nothing is
that is correct.
available. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, that is exactly right. Now I'm going to go back to my follow-up question because you said something I want to dive into. I guess I led you into it, and I just want to address it a little bit more clear. Is if hardening is ranked so highly in both respective frameworks, why is this something that wasn't really done for the last 30 years? I feel like there's a higher trend today. I mean, I know this because business is booming, right, in this respect. So, like, why is it just now we're starting to talk about hardening and not over the last few decades?
I have an opinion.
Yeah. Go ahead, Rich.
Well, it's being paid attention to more because these are all access points for attacks. These,
Yeah.
without doing proper settings, with the automated tooling that the bad guys have and so forth, the weak links are found very rapidly and very easily by the bad guys. So, in that sense, that their methodologies in the past amount of time that you referenced in the past 10 or 15 years
Yeah.
have accelerated the need to have careful configurations across your landscape. And it's increasingly important all the time to really follow the basics, because the best shiny penny new tool is not going to protect your organization if you don't follow the basics properly. And now the time now is more important than ever.
Yep.
Yeah, and I, just to add on to that, I think there's a level of sophistication that, years ago, HTTP was the default standard.
Yep.
Nothing had security on it, and then little by little, these things would get attacked, and it was so porous back then. It was Swiss
Hmm.
cheese.
Hmm.
So as things get, closed down more and more, the attackers have to do more and more to get at the data that they want access to, and the amount of people using technology is much bigger. The amount of money for payouts. I mean,
Yep.
I just read last week they broke the record. There was a $75 million payout. The previous largest one was 40 million. So, in a year from now, will there be a bigger one than 75? Probably, because these things, bigger and bigger companies get hit unless they do these basics, these
Yeah.
hardening. I mean, even things like updates to Windows.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy that some companies would wait 3 months, 6 months before they would, uh, you know, patch machines.
Oh,
Well, you
beyond that,
can't do
run
that anymore.
operating systems that have been out of support for years.
Exactly.
That
And
happens
but you
too.
can't do that anymore. I mean, the bad guys, on Patch Tuesday, they are ripping those things apart. They find out the weaknesses and they start exploiting them within days,
If not,
within
yeah,
hours sometimes.
yeah.
With
So yeah,
it.
that's what I was going
Yeah,
to say. Quicker than
yeah,
that, unfortunately.
And
yeah.
let's give Chrome a shout out where shout outs are due. And Tim Schnur, who's I believe in the comments, he
Yes,
posted
yes.
about this. It's so easy to just do a Chrome update nowadays because it's literally close and reopen with all your tabs saved. They don't even make you lose basically
Mhm,
any work
mhm.
time because it's so quick and smooth. So credit due where credit's due. All right. Let's head over to this next setting here. And yes, John, you're absolutely right in those comments. Banking is well behind, even though their standards and those auditors are picking up from what I've seen. Andy, do you work with banks, or is that out of your target market?
Yeah, out of our target market here in
Toronto.
Canada, yeah, it's pretty regulated. There's 5 big banks across Canada, whereas in the U.S. there's thousands
Yeah.
of different
Yeah,
banks.
regional. Yeah, it's everywhere. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And yeah, definitely some old systems, I'm sure, on those bankings, which
John
is
knows
ever so
but hey,
lovely.
what I'm
if
talking about. He knows.
if RBC or TD is listening, we'd love to work with you.
I would love to have them in the audience. All
Let's
right.
go.
Block third-party cookies is set to enabled. So this is when you go to a site and another site wants to take the information, or could you introduce a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean it's basic tracking across the internet. So these sorts of things have been major problems. Everybody hates the fact that when they do something in one tab or in the browser, they go to some other site, and something that they looked for over here is following them over here. Google and Facebook have made lots and lots of money on this sort of thing, as have lots of people. It's why I always recommend, something other than Chrome, actually. Like my default browser is Brave, because it takes these things in place. So third-party cookies, it's been something that's been talked about for years. Definitely should be disabled.
Yeah, and some sites require you to have cookies enabled, right? You get a lot of those GDPR, they say yes. Do you have like a high level explanation of why, we do want to trust some cookies for some sites? Do you have any insight to that?
Well, some things do require the third-party cookies in order for them to work. So, Microsoft 365 is a prime example. They use a bunch of different disparate services, even though they're all under Microsoft. And so some things will break inside of Microsoft if you don't have third-party cookies on. Salesforce, there's lots of other tools like that break if you don't have it. But as a default, third-party cookies should be disabled. And then enable them on the sites that you need them.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I'm a fan of, and I think, Chrome does it, and I think most browsers do it. And Andy, I think you even referenced it, is, when you have your configuration such that when you close that window or close that tab, it burns all your browsing cookies, and I don't know.
It doesn't have to. It only does that if you have it configured to do so, which I know we've either talked about in a previous week or upcoming, but yes, otherwise everything just stays running in the background, and it's lovely. All right, next setting here. Yeah, next setting here, we got browser sign-in settings is set to enabled, which is meaning disabled browser sign-in. Setting sounds a little contradictive. You get this with a lot of GPOs, but could you give a high-level overview of this one as well?
Yeah, so that's for logging into your Google account, so that things like Google Sync are allowed to run. So again, convenience. It's really convenient that Google allows that, where everything that you do inside the browser syncs up to Google servers and then down onto any other devices. Really convenient if you want to pick up where you left off on a different device. However, again, convenience, security. If you have that set up, and sometimes you do have to have it. I know that some corporate devices, if you're using like Workspace, Google for Workspace, they require you have something like this on. So the enterprise side of things is what I'm talking about there. But by default, having this on shouldn't be there unless the user explicitly needs it or wants it. Again, security and convenience. They may never know that that's actually happening, that Google has a copy of all of their browser, all of their bookmarks and all their browser history, essentially.
Exactly right. If you didn't have this enabled, it's effectively like giving everyone the key to your treehouse or whatever you want to call it, right? It's making sure the right person has the right access, but it is going to very much disrupt the convenience. And when things disrupt convenience, that's when it gets a bump on the level scale. So if you do notice in that bottom right, this is a level 2 setting. So if this is something you're considering doing, make sure to communicate that, test that internally before just full sending, turning it on, which
I can see the setting really being used more with both BYOD scenarios as well as work at home and things like that, where this setting might have been overprivileged, if you will, or over sent out to the organization. It might be a good time to reevaluate that and kind of reel those in if they're no longer needed.
Yeah, I mean, what if you log in on your corporate machine and you're doing this sort of thing, and then at home you log into the browser, you log in with your username and password there, and it goes, hey, do you want to sync all of your everything with your browser history and all your bookmarks and your passwords? And you go, yeah, that's super convenient. And then your kid comes along and they go to log into something, and boom, it puts in the password because, hey,
and your kid's friend and the neighbor and whomever else.
You got it. So it's a mixture of corporate company data and private personal data maybe. And so and the other thing that happens is then you're surfing at home on your device, and that may be against corporate policies, some of the sites that are being gone to. And so then all of a sudden that's mixing back into the corporate side of things. And
Yep.
so it's just something that
Slippery
would cause a
slope.
lot of data leakage, possible data leakage.
Absolutely. And the other thing to call out, you'll see in the bottom left, is that control. This is going to be a reoccurring control, but this does have to do with control 9, which is email and web browser protections. Kind of crazy. Not all of them fall into this category, but these settings do get very specific. So there are some that we will find in other controls, but I believe for the remainder of these are all falling right in control 9. All right, let's hop on over. We're making good time. I know we have a long episode, but this one always makes me laugh because Microsoft, for our OS hardening series, if anyone attended those, we always talk about how Microsoft gathers data, sends diagnostic data, and everything else. Google also has one of their own. So control how Chrome Cleanup reports data to Google is set to disabled. Why don't we just want to send information at blind to Google, Andy? I trust Google.
And sometimes it may be okay, but again, it becomes a data leakage thing. I mean, what if you're a company that's a competitor to Google, and some of that data is going up to Google? Do you fully trust what's going on there? Is that data? People. There's all these conspiracy theories that some of that data that is completely private and Google says is completely private. Well, is it? Do they use that for advertising purposes?
Put it in
Probably
an
some of it they
AI
do.
model, anything. You don't know.
Yeah.
The scary part is you don't really know exactly what data they are taking with them and how that data is being secured. So I always advise in these scenarios, obviously not to share that on purpose, to, don't do that. But if there was an incident where Google really needs information and you have to share something because you're working through a tech support issue, you can share that specific information for that incident if required, and that alone.
Yeah, I mean really what should happen is something should bug the user, and then there should be a little box there that says, "Hey, are you okay to share that with Google?" And it should be unchecked by default. And I'm if that were the case, I'm sure most people would never put a check mark in there because they probably wouldn't want it to. But again, it's Steve Gibson calls it the tyranny of the default, and
Yeah.
that's really what it is. Is this is on by default, and so
Google's
you're
very good
sharing
at collecting
too much.
things. Very good at it.
Well, they're a data company, right? That's how they make their money. So it's just too much sharing.
Data companies, how they make their money. I'm a free product. It is what it is.
You are
So
the
lock
customer.
down where you can.
Exactly.
No, perfect explanation there. Very much agree with those. And again, falling in that control 9, and this is a level 1. So everyone please do this because already this is not disabled by default.
Not cool.
All right, let's keep going. The next setting here, we got disable synchronization of data with Google is set to enabled. So this one by phrasing is actually disabled by default, which kudos on them. But what we're doing here with CIS recommendation is to explicitly set this to enabled as opposed to not configured, which when it's not configured, it'll behave as if disabled.
Yeah.
Super complicated concept. I'm going to do a webinar series episode on that with Derek Melber, but that is what this is saying, and that's why it's a bit confusing. Anyway, Andy, we do not want to synchronize data with Google. Again, why not?
Well, again, it may be something that is necessary. I mean, if you're on a Chromebook and that is something that you have to do in order for it to work properly. But for the most part, it should be disabled. Now, again, by default, this is there. However, the user can go in and override that setting. So this just prevents the user from overriding that setting to allow it to go out.
Yes, that's exactly right. And this is incredibly convenient. Like this above all, I don't know all 100 settings by heart, but like this may be the most convenient setting of all, just so all of your data is everywhere. This is effectively just sending everything you do to the Google Cloud so that you can access it from anyone's computer, anyone's browser. All you got to do is sync it up.
Yep. What could go wrong?
There's no horror stories.
That's all right there.
All right. Let's go.
Actually, just to to prove that point, I think it was with the MGM, or was it with that one? I can't remember. There was one just recently in the last 6 months or 8 months where it was a password that somebody put in on their corporate computer that synced down to their home machine. Their home machine was the one that got compromised, and that's how the bad guys got the password. So again, that shows what things can happen. Now, did he ever mean for it to go down to his home
No.
machine? Maybe not. Probably not.
Right.
Did he intend for his home machine to get infected? Obviously not. But that home machine was not
What
near as
happened?
protected as the corporate machine, except that there was a data leakage.
And it's crazy there because the security of his personal device obviously matters, but it's irrelevant in that story because if settings like this were in place to stop that synchronization or stop that from going to their personal device, it would have been completely avoided, even though the personal device was compromised. And we got our mutual friend Roy hopping into those comments, Andy. So shout
What
out to
could go
Roy.
wrong?
Thanks for
What could
joining.
go wrong? I love that.
Exactly.
I love it. So
Anybody?
very, very true. Like these settings that we talk about week after week, they are not designed to necessarily just create annoyance and make people upset. They are to control the
Yeah.
behavior of that end user so that they're not shooting themselves in the foot, right?
See,
You hear the
you're talking
saying,
about education here, right? This just needs to be articulated to, the story that Andy laid out. Someone's like, hey, I need to do this. Share Andy's story. And, these are the potential risks. And we aren't, that's not acceptable risk for the organization.
I
And
think your story struck some chords with Henry and Roy in the comments. I mean, that is
Hey,
a
Henry.
good example. I
great
mean,
example.
those two guys are huge CIS advocates. But that's a very real story right there. Is the syncing just happens? So
Yeah.
And,
look at these settings. These are preventative. They're designed to protect you.
explain it in a reasonable way. And then when you're done with that, you do what Andy would do and you say, what could go wrong?
I actually have a follow-up question to that. Matt Lee is a big advocate against like introducing what these settings are. There's so
Yeah.
many that it's
Yeah.
overwhelming to the end
It's
client.
yeah.
Something like a high-level concept like this regarding syncing computers and everything. Is this a topic you might talk about with a client or just something you do in the back end?
Well, we often talk to clients about hardening their machine, and that in doing so, things may not work the same way that they will at home. But that again is a control factor of making sure that that machine stays secure. So we also use Threat Locker, so we don't allow software to be run on a machine just willy
Nice.
nilly.
Yeah.
So they can't just go out to the internet and download any software they want. And in fact, we've stopped like a ton of ransomware from being introduced to organizations. That's just the nature of the beast. We stop that stuff from happening. They hear it
Right.
on the news all the time. We want to prevent that. So, and sometimes end users versus the company owners have a different perspective. The company owners are like, yeah, I never want that to happen. The end users get a little annoyed that they can't just download a game and play it at noon. But hey, security matters.
Yeah. Tell me I can't watch the Olympics at work, Andy. What are you telling me that for?
Just the highlights, Zach. Just the
Just the
highlights.
highlights. Yeah.
All right, that's perfect. Let's go on to this next setting here. So and I got a cat on my table. I know you guys can't see the
Lucky.
guy, but he is
I saw the
blocking
tail.
blocking me
Oh,
from
there
even seeing what setting we're on, Bruno. So welcome to the webinar series. All right,
this is a cat-free zone here at the moment. That could change.
that could change. All right, now that I can see which setting we're on here, so ensure enable alternate error pages is set to disabled. I mean, this sounds like something to spoof, I would assume, with a phishing attack. But Andy, explain this setting a little bit further.
Yeah. I mean, somebody could replace, a page not found with a spoofing page that, has something for them to click a link to download something. So there's, I can't fathom a need of having an alternate error page that you want to come up there because replacing that error page with something else just prone for attacks on phishing or as you say on here why it matters misinformation.
I mean, let's talk about a use case. I mean, if I was an all care client and I did click a fish, right, or whatnot, or went to an alternate error page, and that alternate error page was branded with all care IT, I'd
Hmm.
probably click a few more buttons, right?
It's
Talk
a way
about
for it's a way
confusing.
to establish persistence, is what that is.
It is.
that's
Yeah.
the, that's the threat risk.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Now, for the most part, somebody has to get onto that machine or be able to edit those error pages in
Yeah,
order to do that. Once you're on the machine, kind of game over anyway. But really, I can't see a good side of having this available, um, other than perhaps a company wanting to replace something to say, hey, this site isn't, available.
it's
But
blocked
for
or
the most part, yeah, we do those with DNS tools instead
sure.
to say, this content isn't available because it, violates company policies,
Not safe
and the
for work.
tool does that rather than the browser. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I know Matt also talks about, a lot of these settings here, and CIS as a company, they assume you don't have any third
Exactly.
party platforms, right? So these
Yeah.
recommendations here are 100% things you can do as long as you have a browser, right? So they don't take into consideration ThreatLocker, Senteon, right? These are all outside of it. And yeah, end users going to click, end user click. I mean, that is spot on. And one thing I love emphasizing in here, and obviously this setting directly relates, is phishing. So these hardening measures do mitigate the risk of a phish being successful, right? It's kind of crazy to think settings and browsers can be mitigating something like you only associate with email, right? Is this something you communicate to your prospects or customers when you talk about hardening? Or does this go a
Um,
little too technical for them, which is perfectly fine?
yeah, to me, I wouldn't talk about this specific one because there's hundreds and hundreds of ways of hardening a machine, and this is just one of the technical aspects. But again, really restricting the porousness of all of the operating systems, and in this case, browsers. I mean, we even talk about it from the aspect of Microsoft 365. Like the moment that you get Microsoft 365 is the most insecure that it'll ever be.
Yep.
After that, you turn on policies and you lock things down. Um, it's kind of analogous to moving into a house. When you get a brand new house, there might be just a lock on the front door and that's it. But there isn't an alarm system. There isn't like an additional latch, like a bigger lock. There isn't a guard dog. There isn't all of these things. But as you move your precious things into that house, your family, your stuff, you want to lock things down. And so Microsoft 365 by default doesn't have those things locked down because there's no data in there. But once you start putting your data in there, that's when you want to start turning on these policies and lock things down. And the Microsoft security score is a great way to see it. You
Yep.
see it at the baseline, and then you never want to see it go down. Like, don't shut things off that are already on by default. You want to keep increasing it.
Yep, absolutely. The analogy I always talk about, and talk about 365 for the audience, as this is high level educational. 365 hardening is different than hardening that local endpoint, right?
Yeah,
Hardening just the 365 is like a hard shell piece of candy, right? You have that hardened shell at the cloud level, but the moment something is compromised, be a gooey, easy center if you don't actually have the endpoint hardened as well. So,
absolutely.
not saying one or the other, I'm saying both.
What I
Oh,
like to advise is on settings like this, they don't really require a big discussion, with
no.
the
Mhm.
client. But what you can do is just enable them as described by CIS. And, if someone has an issue with it, if someone wants to do one of these kinds of things, let them bring a business case forward. And maybe someone has a clear business case, and then you can put the protections required for that use case around that particular scenario. But
Perfect.
I would just turn that stuff off by default. If people have issues with
Absolutely.
it, let's make it an exception and either accept or deny.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
And we are going to have to keep some pace here. I didn't budget time incredibly well. So let's go on over to enable deleting browser and download history is set to disabled. So we actually want to keep this stuff, which
Yeah.
kind of intuitively goes against, keeping data you may not need. But why would we want to keep this?
Well, I mean, generally the browser history. is something that people go in to try and hide the evidence of where they've been. So they've either tried to go to a site that they're embarrassed or they're unauthorized to go to, or it could be a malicious site that they've gone to. But generally, it's like an adult site. But if they've gone to a site and they clicked on something and some pop-ups came up and something perhaps happened to their machine, they may be embarrassed and they shut it all down and then they erase those things. Well, if something happens where you've got to go back and look at the evidence, if they've removed that evidence, it's hard to see what happened. Now, you can probably look in DNS logs and different things to find out, but having the user erase these things, they're trying to hide evidence. So it's not a good way of doing it. Now, this isn't an end all be all, because we have had users where something like this is they're not allowed to erase the evidence, but then they do some Google searches and they know where the database is and they just go in and delete the database. And so you can't stop some of those things from happening, but it stops it the easy way of just going in and saying erase the history on this.
Yeah. And you say, erasing evidence of their own wrongdoing, but without meaning to, they're helping that attacker hide their evidence and their audit trail.
Yeah, and it could very well be that it's part of a script where an attacker is on the machine and the script tries to do this sort of thing. And so again, you want to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, I feel like that's even just as important as, let's assume someone, isn't going to inappropriate sites, but, potentially a bad guy had got access to the machine and they're doing, inappropriate things with the browser, maybe internally or externally, setting up command and control, whatever it might be. And, you want to be able to see what's happening there.
Yeah, awesome. We've had issues with that where somebody allowed an attacker, they went to a random site. It said, hey, it's Microsoft and your machine is infected, call this number. They get on with AnyDesk and then they start looking inside the browser and they do some certain things and they hide things and then they go in and they erase the history. So again, it just erases some of the evidence that you can go back and say, what did these guys do while they were on here? Now, again, I would never trust the machine from then on anyway. I'd recommend a wipe and reload, but sometimes it's really good to see where they went. Did they try and go into your bank while you were there? And did you have passwords in your browser that pre-filled those things in? Were they able to scrape some of that evidence?
I think we'll have to do another episode. I think I want to definitely I wish we had more time to dive into, what to do after, compromise and how to handle the conflicts. But that'll be a follow-up episode. So that was a really good comment. I will want to resume later. But let's keep the settings going. The next one here, we got enable predict network actions is set to enabled, do not predict, which is just my favorite because you're enabling an enable, but by doing so, you're not enabling. Anyway, do not predict actions on any network connection. Why would we not want to allow this prediction technology, I guess?
Well, it's essentially a prefetch, right? It's going to sites or pages within that site that the user may not ever want to go to, and yet in network traffic logs, it would show that they went that site was visited because it's the browser is doing something predictively that the user isn't asking for. So again, it may pages may ring off all kinds of alerts that something was visited when the user didn't actually do it. It was the browser doing something on the user's behalf. Yeah. So to me, it's not a good idea.
They're using all kinds of information to do this, right? Location services, potentially, your past history. I mean, they have a whole algorithm figured out. There's punching you into that. And I don't think you really want to participate.
And again, it could lead to a bit of a data leak because they're using predictive data on the local machine to go out to other places. So again, you're leaking more information than you need to.
Yep. When I'm at a library, I don't need my own book tossed at me from the shelf. So very much agree with that. All right. The next setting here, enable or disable spell checking web service is set to disabled. Spell checking doesn't sound that end of world. I imagine the setting's probably referring to a third party. Can you talk about this setting a little bit?
Actually, I didn't even think of it from a third-party perspective. I was thinking of it from Google's perspective. Again, it's just leaking more data out to Google when you don't need to. If you want to do spell check or you want to do some translation of some sort, the user should be able to choose when they want to do that, not have it automatically happen.
Yeah, I mean, when I handwrite anything, it's not like I ask my friends to read my work to tell me if there's any typos, right? It's nice to have, right, that auto correction, but it is, I mean, it's reading and potentially saving every word that you type that could be private or sensitive.
You're poking holes that don't need to be opened up, or data leakage again.
Oh, come on.
Yep. Again, it's just more data that Google has, and so that's why they enable it by default. But it could potentially leak data that you didn't want leaked.
For sure. Looks like we lost Zach temporarily.
Oh, we lost their master of ceremonies.
Sorry, my cat sat on the keyboard that time, and I completely lost everything. But I am back. So it's what I get for trying to set him down so that I can actually see the next slide. But here we go. Oh, and as I speak, we lose Andy. Maybe he has a cat on his own.
I have no cats here. No cats at all.
Just decided to play fun. All right, that's perfect. I imagine you wrapped up this slide just fine. So let's head to the next one. We have about 8 minutes left, and I think only 4 settings. So this one, again, is talking about more sending data to Google without them asking for it. But enable reporting of usage and crash-related data is set to disabled. If something crashes, don't I want my provider, in this case Google, to know about it? Why would we want to hide this?
Well, it grabs everything from memory, so all of the different tabs that you had open. So again, do you want Google to have all of that data? They love to have the data, but it shouldn't automatically go there. Again, the user should choose, do I want that to go there? And again, I would argue if there was a checkbox that said, and it was disabled by default, would somebody click, yes, I want Google to have this? Possibly, but probably most people would choose no. So again, tyranny of the default on this one.
Yeah, I think we've covered this one. And
yeah, but we do need to highlight Henry Tim's comment here. If we can toss that on. Andy, serious question. Would my cat count as an insider threat in this scenario?
Absolutely. Look at the keys he was typing.
He's a threat actor.
My caps lock was on and everything. So I mean, it's absolutely
wonderful. Did a DDoS attack to you, right? You got disconnected. So.
Camera crashed. I was down. I was out. I couldn't work for a whole 30 seconds. It was the best. It was the quietest 30 seconds of my life. Anyway. All right. Absolutely. All right. We did beat this one down. So absolutely agree. We don't need to send data that's not needed. We can send it to them after the fact if we need to. All right, next setting here. We got enable safe browsing for trusted sources is set to disabled. This one sounds a little backwards to me. Why we wouldn't want safe browsing for trusted sources available? Is that because they're already trusted, so safe browsing is unnecessary? Or can you share some extra insight to that one?
Well, I like what you put on this one, right? They sometimes, these trusted sources, fail to maintain security standards. So, trusted by who? So, just because they're trusted, I mean, just because you see a website that has HTTPS, does that mean that everything on that site is secure? No, it just means that your communication with them is secure. But can an HTTPS site host malware? Of course it can. Yep. Years ago, NFL.com got hit and they were hosting malware. And that was right before the Super Bowl. So is it a trusted site? Probably by a lot of people. A lot of people go there and, they've got a huge IT budget, but, something failed there.
Yep, absolutely. So we should definitely still make this available. All right. The final 3 settings with 5 minutes left, kind of like an NFL game right here. So we got enable search suggestions is set to disabled. this sounds like another predictive type of
Same.
configuration that's unnecessary. But why don't we want help with our searches?
Well, if the user didn't intend to do it, then the browser shouldn't assume something. Again, network traffic goes out. I hate anything that's predictive.
Distraction.
Yeah.
I mean, it says it right there in the did you know, right? It is literally taking the user data and preferences to help with a search. I will actually push back personally, and maybe I'm just, biased towards security, but CIS has this as a level 2. I feel like this should be a level 1.
Noted.
I'll comment on the workbench after the episode. But Andy, we've talked about predictive settings. Is there anything additional you want to add to this one?
No, I mean, if the user didn't ask for it to be done, for the most part, it shouldn't be done. You can derive data out of something that's predictive. So, I mean, look at what happened with Intel. Intel, with their chips, wanted to do things that were predictive to save time, and for the most part, it worked really well until people found a workaround and saw that there was a data leakage because there was predictive. So, it's a convenience thing. They're doing it so that, hey, we're just offering you more, but you can derive data out of that.
Yep, absolutely. All right, 2 more settings here. So this next one here is about translating. So enable translate is set to disabled once we get this slide to head on over.
Yeah,
Moderator
and to me,
Mito loss. There we go.
this
All right.
one's the same as the spell check. It's the same principle. You're leaking data out to Google that you may not have wanted to.
Because in order to what's the word? Translate. Yeah, that is on the screen. I don't know why I guess the cat threw me off my game. But in order to translate, obviously Google needs to read what it's translating. So you're already accepting that data and that potential leakage. How are they storing it? What are they doing with it? But you're allowing that to happen. And this is another one, and I will agree right here, Rich, with the level 2, because that would be super annoying if I was, a non-security minded end client and I wanted to simply copy paste something. What did they say? Right? Maybe an international sale deal. And I'm like, what did they mean to say? Like, that would be very frustrating not to have this access. So I do empathize here with the level 2, but from what Andy just shared, like, I understand why it's valuable not to allow this.
Yeah, to me, the user needs to choose that rather than it just predetermine that it's going to.
Awesome. All right, last setting of the day. We made it with just enough time. So enable URL keyed anonymized data collection is set to disabled. Why does Google have all of this on by default? That's sarcastic. But Andy, why would we want to make this explicitly disabled?
Well, I mean, you're helping Google with all of their services by feeding more data to them. So
literally what they sell.
Exactly. Things that are set to anonymized are not always set to anonymized. There's been lots of things that have been tested where completely anonymized data, or they say completely anonymized data, they were able to actually track down people and say, hey, this was you. And so that anonymized data, not always that way. And you're helping Google with their services, yes, but at the possibility of data leakage.
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, you said it spot on. If they basically have the ability to do this, so you need to block it. I mean, when I go out to a theme park or wherever I want, I don't want someone following me with a notepad on everything I'm doing. And that's, in my opinion, exactly what this is doing.
Yeah, good analogy.
Awesome. All right.
As well.
That is all the settings. We have a couple more high level. We'll probably run 2 or 3 minutes over. But I mean, Andy, at the end of the day, we talked about a lot of settings, a lot of attack mitigation. But I mean, at the highest level, to an MSP looking at doing this from an attacker point of view, why should the CIS benchmarks be prioritized?
Well, like what you've got there on the slide, MITRE takes apart, and so does CIS, takes apart all of the attacks that happen. They categorize them and they say, how could this have been mitigated? Things that happened 5 years ago are exceptionally easy to do nowadays. The sophistication has moved quite a lot, and so all of these ways that attackers go after data, you need to look at all of these different ways so that you can mitigate that risk.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
two awesome organizations, CIS and MITRE. Love them both.
Thank you, Andy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we partner with MITRE. I think a lot of people know, and we do change the priorities of things and add things and so forth based upon our collaborations with MITRE as well. So it's a long and relationship that we value very much, and we're much better for it.
And
Absolutely.
MITRE even a year ago was not near as complex as it is now, because the attackers keep changing what happens, which is why cyber insurance goes up, which is why we need to do more
Mhm.
for our clients. It's a constant evolving threat.
This.
The war that we're up against, it's like any type of normal war. It's not sticks and rocks anymore, and it's not guns anymore. These things progress, and so you have to keep on upping your game.
Yep, absolutely. And all of these attacks listed on here can be mitigated. The efficacy, the successful rate of these can be mitigated by literally using the 15 settings we talked about today. It's not about attacking all 1,000 recommendations at once. Just the 15 we did today will mitigate the risk of these being successful. All right, with already 1 minute over, this next slide here, really quick, kind of takeaway for any MSP looking at starting to do this. There's a lot of benefits. But Andy, if you were talking to a first-time MSP building out his stack, building out his priorities, why would you recommend them to consider hardening as one of the top priorities?
Well, we talk a lot about protecting your kingdom, protecting your data. So that first icon that you have there really resonates with me. That in order to protect these things, you've got to put up moats, and you've got to put up walls, and you've got to put up all of these different things. So hardening something is a very easy way to mitigate a tremendous amount of threats. Turning on MFA on your Microsoft 365 mitigates 99 point, I think it's
Yeah,
9%
that's an
of
incredible
attacks.
stat.
Yeah, so it's yes. Is it inconvenient to have the MFA there? Yeah, it's not quite as convenient as just a username and a password, but you immediately see some massive benefits. You don't have those business email compromises, so near as easily, I should say.
Yes.
So hardening is one of those things that it's just a must do. You have to do it in order to stop what the bad guys are. Stop some of the attacks that these bad guys are coming out with.
Mhm. Yeah, all the attacks follow patterns, like in the MITRE, obviously identifies those patterns, and
Yeah,
hardening is clearly a pattern,
Yep.
yeah,
part of a pattern.
Awesome.
Anyway.
Well, that will wrap up the episode. So before I preview kind of the next episode coming up, Andy, I'm happy to give you the spotlight here to close up. Anything you really want to leave the audience here and the takeaway from the episode, or something you're passionate about?
I'm just hugely passionate about these frameworks, CIS and NIST. They're not the only frameworks out there. There's other frameworks, and some of them, compliance reasons, you have to adhere to certain frameworks. But these frameworks work with other frameworks, and they just are awesome to do. Very easy to talk to clients about certain parts of them. Other parts of them, we just completely don't talk to them about it, and we just do it, and we tell them, you're relying on us to protect you. This is how we protect you. So yeah, I love the prescriptiveness of CIS. So keep it up.
Thank
Awesome
you.
organization. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. And you know what? I prefaced before the call, I wouldn't forget to ask you, but my reoccurring question, where is the most interesting place you've taken a customer call?
I was hoping you were going to forget, Zach.
I
Yeah.
don't need your crap given to me after the episode.
The most interesting place that I've taken a call. Airport, probably, I guess. Yeah, I did take a call once as I was boarding a plane, and helped out somebody as I was. Hate doing that. I hate being the one that's on the
Yeah.
phone, but
Yeah. You
yeah,
were that guy.
yeah, I had to, unfortunately.
Hey, when the phone rings, I mean, being in that food line or the check-in line, I get it. So glad you could still help them. Sounds like you made your flight, which is most important. So thank
Well,
you for being
not
here.
many have my cell phone number, so it was it was somebody that did that.
Smart.
That is very fair. All right. Thank you for being an incredible guest. So, just wrapping up here, if we can highlight this final slide with our agenda of what's coming up. So, we are going to have the Friday field report as I previewed at the start of this. And let's go to make this slide full screen if we don't mind. it is going to be with ConnectWise. Senteon is part of Pitch It. So we're going to talk a little bit about ChannelCon, some trends we're seeing. Really excited to be part of their panel. Next week, we have Joe Alapat. Potentially his first webinar post RoarCon. I'm not sure if that's actually true or not, but I'm very excited to hear his take on his first conference trade show of his own. I think, Rich, you actually helped out. You and Dan Lee made the introduction from me to Joe at RSA. So thank you for that. We obviously hit it off. I'm really excited to have him on. And we're going to end the Chrome hardening series with a friend of Chris Lair from Solus Security. That dude, I'm caught up with him at ChannelCon. Holy crap, that dude is in the forensics world and the IR, and I'm really excited for that one. So with that, thank you again for joining. You can catch the replays on our YouTube page. Go to app.senteon.co. Let us know settings webinar, and you're welcome to generate some free assessments. Outside of that, guys, thank you for being here. Thanks for being an awesome guest.